In this presentation, we're gonna see Introduction to Windbg. So in last couple of presentations, we have seen using it, but I have not given any formal introduction to this tool. So they're gonna be a series of presentation regarding Windbg, starting with this. Windbg, or the Windows Debugger, is the single most powerful tool in Windows platform. So it's a debugging tool for Microsoft operating system and applications. It can be freely downloaded. It comes with SDK, WDK, etc. Like in the case of Visual Studio Debugger, we can put breakpoints, watch and execute code step by step. So it has all the features of a normal debugger. But it's much more powerful than older versions of Visual Studio, although newer versions of Visual Studio is going to integrate the features of Windbg into it as well. Now let's see a short demo of basic debugging in Windbg. So we are not going to look at any advanced features. So we are just going to see the normal source code debugging. So this is how a Windbg looks when it is started. So after the installation of debugging tools for Windows, which is coming with SDK or DDK as I mentioned, you can double click on an exe called windbg.exe. If you do that, this is what you're gonna see. Here what we're gonna do is we're gonna debug the list entry sample which we have seen before. Nothing specific about the sample. I'm just selecting a random sample. I'm going to open that exe in Windbg. So file, open, executable. I have browsed to that particular path, so I'm going to open the exe. As you can see, the exe has started, but we got a very early breakpoint, so I'm not going into the details of this particular breakpoint. It is much before the execution of your main function. We'll see the details of this later. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the source file. So I have opened the source file right here for this particular program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint in the main. So the key combination is the same. You can press F9. So we'll try to load the symbols at that point in time, because symbols are needed for putting a breakpoint. So that's why you're getting this particular warning here. So we'll discuss all this detail later in different presentations. So I have put a breakpoint. So instead of pressing F9, you can use this button as well. So there are buttons for all the things we're gonna do using keyboard. So it is pretty similar to Visual Studio. Shift F11 is step out and F11 is step into. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press F5 such that it will break on this breakpoint which we have put it in the main function. So the breakpoint has hit. That's why we can see the red became pink. That is the signature of breakpoint hit. So don't look at this window so far. I'll give you a detailed explanation later. So now we can do pretty much everything we were doing in Visual Studio. So we can go to the view. We can do watch like we were doing in Visual Studio. We can see the local variables just like in the case of Visual Studio. Although the UI is not that flashy like Visual Studio, it is the same information. Now you can see the memory, you can see the registers, you can see the call stack. Call stack has more information than Visual Studio here. So if you look at, so you can see the row arguments. information about the function, a lot of additional information you can see in the call stack window, which we will explain later again. So a lot of things we gonna see in this presentation is just an overview, not anything in detail. Now disassembly, just like in the case of Visual Studio, so you can see that exact instruction which it has broken into. Now just like in the case of Visual Studio, if I press F10, next instruction will get executed, next line will get executed. Like that I can proceed. Just press F10. So this is F10. So this is one window which is additional in Windbg, which was not there in Visual Studio, at least in the older versions of Visual Studio. So this window is called the command window. So I will tell you the significance of this particular window, and this is probably the most important window. So this is where you do most of your debugging task. It's a command based, there is no menu, it's a completely command based input system. So going back to our slides, there is a lot of advantages with Windbg. This is a very incomplete list. First and foremost thing is it's very lightweight. You can do an X copy. You can just copy the exe. There is no installation required for Windbg. In most cases you just copy that binary wherever you want. This is very important feature in production debugging. In most of the production environment, customers won't let you install anything. So in that case you can just copy Windbg and start it and debug. It has no dependency at all other than the binaries in that particular folder and the operating system itself. It has huge number of commands and extensions which we're gonna see shortly. Those commands and extensions are the features makes this tool very powerful. Endless opportunities to understand and resolve the most difficult problem in Windows. So as I mentioned, this is the most powerful tool in Windows, and there is no exception to that. Another area which Windbg helps is dump analysis or postmortem debugging. So following a couple of challenges you may face with this particular tool. Most of the important features of the tool are command driven and no menu or UI. So we have seen that command window. Everything is done using commands in that command window. And the commands are not very intuitive or there is any good documentation. So I would say personally documentation is not very good when it comes to Windbg. Unlike other tools coming from Microsoft, in Windbg not everything works as it should be. There are multiple different reasons for this. I'm not getting into any of those things. Sometimes things doesn't go where it should be. Another bigger challenge with Windbg for advanced debugging is a lack of private symbols from Microsoft. So that will limit a lot of the capabilities. Some of the binaries like NTOS kernel, they provide the type information of global variables, but in some binaries you don't even have that, like Win32k.sys. So private symbols, lack of private symbols is another major issue if you are debugging outside Microsoft. Due to above mentioned reasons, very few people uses this tool. For that reason, there is very little inputs from the community. For example, if you look for something in Java or C#, you'll get a lot of response from Stack Overflow, forum.msdn, etc. If you have some problem in kernel debugging, your driver and some of your extension commands are not working, probably if you're lucky you will get some reply from OSR online or something like that. But very limited community. So that is the summary of this presentation. We have seen Windbg as a debugger in Windows. We have seen the pros and cons. Also, we have seen the similarity with Visual Studio and Windbg, and we're gonna use this particular tool a lot from now. I'll be introducing the basic aspect of the tool first, and we're gonna dig the operating system using this particular tool, and we're gonna understand the operating system. So this is one of the analogy one of my friend told me while I was in Microsoft, and this movie got released at that time. So this makes a lot of sense in many ways. Not a lot of people know the true nature of this tool, and it's a very powerful tool, and it is a lifesaver when it comes to some specific problems, complicated problems which has no other solution. This tool is like a silent guardian for Windows. Due to the nature of the extensions it has, especially the ones inside Microsoft, it is much more powerful than GDB or any other equivalent open source tools. So that's it. Thank you very much.